Hi, hello, and welcome, or welcome back, I suppose. I have released myself from horror and somehow fallen upon something that has served as the perfect transition out of it. This book uses elements of the gothic, fairy tales, and ghost tales to bring us a story that captivated and broke me. So let's get on to a book that I've actually been meaning to read for years at this point, with The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton. Spoilers ahead. Now, I will start by saying that while I never finished it before, a number of years ago I did make a start on this book, getting about a third of the way in. I can't remember why I never finished it, but unfinished it went until now. Obviously, I started from the beginning this time. It's been nearly 10 years since I read it for the first time, and there was little detail I remembered, barring one reveal which I remember feeling rather proud of calling before it was actually shown. I remember having that feeling of vindication when I was reading it. But anyway, let's get on to our quick summary. Quick, it's me. But anyway, it's October 1686 and Petronella Ortman, usually just called Nella, is an 18-year-old girl from the Dutch countryside who has been married to a much older man in the capital of Amsterdam. In the house she moves into, there's her husband, Johannes Brandt, his sister Marin, a maid, Cornelia, and a house servant, Otto. It is important to note that Otto is a black man. He is not a slave in this house and is employed properly, but his race is an important feature of his story within the book. Obviously, this book is set during the time, like in the UK, we had the East India Trading Company. The VOC is kind of the equivalent to that in Holland. This is the period in which we really start to see the slave trade picking up in terms of how we are aware of it today, if that makes sense. I don't think I explained that well, but Johannes is not particularly affectionate with Nella and certainly has no real desire to be physically affectionate or to consummate their marriage. As a wedding gift, Johannes buys his wife a replica of their house, sort of with the front shaved off, as it were, so you get the perfect interior. And though it is unfinished, this interior is a brilliant recreation. Nella finds herself a miniaturist to get some furnishing for the house, but receives more than she initially bargained for. As time passes, she receives more and more from this mysterious miniaturist, and each of these objects seems far more true to life than they have any right to be, and more often than not, she never actually asked for these items. It seems that the miniaturist knows too much about the Brandt household, things she should not be able to know. Some of the objects seem to be a warning, but to what end, Nella can't seem to grasp, often until it's too late. This book is a dive into the difference between public and private lives, and control of one's own destiny, also looking at the hypocrisy of people who are not as pious as they claim, but have to save face. But obviously that falls into the difference between the public and private lives there, but the piety does play a huge role within this. So, when I was reading the first time, I picked up on something in the way that Johannes was around his new bride. It didn't just seem like he wasn't keen on her, or that this was a marriage of mere financial benefit. He seemed to like her well enough, but there wasn't really any desire there. For so long, until the reveal, I was just like, he's gay, isn't he? And it's clear that everyone in this book has their secrets, and I really felt like this was his. Lo and behold, when Nella walks into his place of work, she finds him lying with a delivery man, and I felt vindicated in my big, wrinkly brain. But I don't know how much further I made it into my initial read-through, but any other reveals were a mystery to me. Even if, while reading them, I did manage to suss them out, they were reveals in their own right. There's not something that I remembered. But when it came to this aspect of the book in particular, meaning Johannes' sexuality, I knew it was going to play a heavy role, hoping it wouldn't end tragically, but fearing that it would. This is a book looking at the ways in which we have to present ourselves to the outside world, and how we can and do behave differently when nobody's looking. Eventually he is caught by somebody other than Nella, and it does see him on trial and put to death for the crime of sodomy, the man he lay with only getting away with it because he claimed he was attacked. People Johannes almost called friends were the ones to catch him, and in an act of petty revenge they dobbed him in, working with the delivery man to create this attack story. We watch Johannes try for as long as he can to hold on to his wit and his charm, but the closer we get to him meeting his fate, the harder it is for him. It's incredibly heart-wrenching, and I was hoping right up until his death sentence was actually carried out that he would somehow be pardoned, or he'd escape, somehow he would get to make it. And while at first Johannes seems a little too aloof and unaffectionate, I love the way we see his character grow and blossom as he learns that he can trust Nella, the way he trusts the others in the house to keep his secret. This is not an aspect of himself that he can change, but rather an aspect of his soul, and that's how his sister puts it. And yes, Johannes is rather impulsive, even when it comes to him acting on his queer desires. He is fiercely loyal and protective of his loved ones, and the way we see his character grow throughout is magnificent, and I love the way he remains protective of his younger sister right up until the end. There is something that Nella has discovered about Marin, his sister, that he also knows, but she is allowing him to keep the secret. She hasn't revealed that she knows this. She is letting him remain protective of his sister, and I think that's really beautiful. And his sexuality is not the only reveal, of course, and they're all done rather well. Everything surrounding Marin was handled excellently, and seeing her character get fleshed out was just brilliant. She's a hard character to like because she is so intent on being a hard shell to crack. She knows that there is much that needs to be kept hidden within the Brandt household, with herself as much as with her brother, but there is a hopelessly romantic heart within her, and one that is just so full of love. And what I like is that the characters tend not to wholly change. There's just more insight into them. Hard shells become cracked a little, a fiercely protective nature becomes apparent, fear allows itself to be seen, but all the while they remain noticeably themselves. I've seen before in stories where secrets being revealed is a major factor, that characters become completely new when their secrets are revealed, even if that isn't necessary. Like, just because Marin's hard shell cracks a little, it is not something that falls completely to reveal a new woman. The hard shell has a soft interior, yes, but it is there for a good reason. She has love and gentleness to her, but that is not separate from the colder woman we've seen thus far. This isn't the sort of thing where we're getting a villain reveal, so that's why they act completely differently. But sometimes even with reveals like this, where we find out there's actually love and kindness beneath, we suddenly never see that hardness. It's like, if you're putting that up 24/7, or, pretty much that is sort of still an aspect to you. And I am always fond of character-driven narratives and Burton does a fantastic job of creating this collection of well-rounded people that I got myself so deeply invested in. It's no real surprise that I spent the last few chapters of the book on the brink of tears, quite frankly. This is not a book with a happy ending at all, and it all just hits you at once towards the end. I'd got so wrapped up with these people, feeling so entangled in the short time I spent with them, that I was truly heartbroken by the end. And frankly, her characterization for everyone was just top tier. There's a woman called Agnes who's connected to the Brandts because Johannes has been hired by her husband really, but to sell her sugar for her, given that he's a merchant. This woman is such an unconscionable cow in every single way. From the moment I met her, I wanted the worst for her, and of course she's one of the main reasons that Johannes ends up with the death sentence in the end. And The way she behaves with Otto, look, I get that she hasn't seen many, if any, black people before, but you can still treat him with human decency and not like he's an animal at a zoo for you to just gawk at. She annoys me so bad. If I ever watch the adaptation of this book, I know I want to hurl things at the screen every time I see that woman. Her husband isn't much better, but he's a conniving kind of goit rather than a loud and proud annoyance. Now, I said in my intro that this feels like a good transition from the horror I've been reading into, well, anything else. So let's dive into that a little bit more. Within the house itself, there are whispers and movements in the night that have this element of the ghostly to them. We find the truth of this later on, and it is very much human, but the way Burton writes these strange, tense scenes feels so haunting, and Marin's strange bedroom with all sorts of trinkets and taxidermy from around the world have a feeling like a Bluebeard type villain. I thought for a hot minute that she was going to turn on Nella, but like, she's got this basically an entire natural history museum crammed into a tiny little room, and it's all just like a lot. But there's also a moment where there's a scream in the night, which Nella chalks up to being one of the dogs in order to sort of make herself feel better. But on reflection, well, at least Marin was enjoying herself. I'll say that much. But the miniaturist herself is the most haunting aspect of this book. Not only is she this literally stalking figure of Nella, occasionally when she's out, she'll just see her in church, she'll see her on the street staring at her, really, because she's so like pale, she's got this bright blonde hair, she's noticeable in a crowd, and she sort of shines, and she is very ghostly, but she also has like just far too much insight into the Brandt household for a woman who has never met a single member of the family, and her quote-unquote gifts to fill the dollhouse start to become like omens. It is her presence that takes this from feeling like a run-of-the-mill historical fiction novel to something that has a more gothic edge to it. And we do eventually get insight into the woman making other miniatures, but I personally did find it a little lackluster. I think honestly it just came too late in the book. It all worked and it made sense, but it was surrounded by so many other major plot points that it felt a little washed away for me. Johannes had just been sentenced to death, and he also wasn't the only one meeting his end around that time, so it just felt a little out of place. Like, Johannes has been given a death sentence, and Marin has, like, we found out she's been pregnant. She has a day or two later passed herself. We also find that the father is Otto. All of that's happening. These major reveals about big characters who we've already had the connection and insight to, and finding out that, yeah, this is just a strange girl with a gift. It's sort of like we sort of figured that, and the reveal needed to happen earlier for me for it to make sense. And I also just wish that she actually could have had a one-on-one with Nella, but instead it's done by proxy with somebody else. It's fine. Personally, it wasn't my favourite, but it was interesting. You know, I like that little element of magic / mysticism that the miniaturist brings. It isn't clear at first if she's a kind of oracle or if she is just a bit of a stalker, but I like that there's genuinely just a little bit of fantasy scattered into a book that is, on the whole, incredibly grounded. And I like that the dollhouse and its contents become a way of reflecting destiny. Do we choose it, or is it all set out before us? And eventually, Nella takes an axe to the thing, unable to fully destroy all the contents. She is on the cusp of going, no, I control things from here, but there's still this nagging doubt that in destroying it all, something could happen. She knows that she could control her own destiny, but there is a comfort in knowing that somebody is taking care of that for her. And that's what it feels like with the miniaturist. And I am so glad I finally actually read this book. I have been meaning to get on it for so long, and it's just been staring at me and taunting me from my bookshelf, but it can do so no longer. I will likely look at Burton's other work in the future. It's pretty easy reading, even if emotionally that isn't the case, and this really did capture that feeling I often talk about with historical fiction at this time of year. Everything is all cold and misty and rainy and dreary weather. It's like Dutch weather is basically British weather, and it works perfectly. This is set like October through to a new year, so we are in the perfect season for it. And if you are in need of some good historical fiction, then certainly seek this out. From what I gather, this does take a little from a real person, from a couple of real people and objects. Like the miniature house is a real object. Petronella Ortman and Johannes Brandt were real people, but this narrative is entirely fictionalized. Like every part of this, barring this person had this name, this person had this, like names and objects, real. Characterizations and events, fictionalized. Like names are used, but there's no resemblances drawn for any of the people featured. Next week, I believe I am still on the historical fiction train with The Maiden by Kate Foster, so do stick around for that. Let me know your favourite authors or books in the historical fiction realm. While I am generally a sucker for Victorian era and or Gothic style stuff, I am completely open to seeing what you have to recommend to me. And if you've watched the adaptation of this book, let me know what you thought, because I do want to watch it, but I also want to know if I'm going to be in for a disappointment. And feel free to like, feel free to subscribe, and feel free to ring that notification bell or the cringe shit I'm supposed to ask you to do in my videos. But most importantly, I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful night, a wonderful whenever you are watching this. Take good care of yourself. Right.